Good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Boyden. I'm Wendy Wilsker, managing partner of Boyden Boston. This morning, I'm excited to have a conversation with the remarkable Yolanda F. Johnson. Yolanda is a professional lyric opera singer and philanthropy leader turned serial social entrepreneur. She is a dreamer. She is a doer. She is creating communities to address racial and gender equity in philanthropy. She is also a fundraising consultant who believes that fundraisers are the beacons of light and hope that illuminate the path to do the good work needed in the world today. Above all, Yolanda wants for everyone to find their place to do good work, to realize their gifts and talents, to work for the good. Yolanda F. Johnson is a woman making history today. She is the founder and president of YFJ Consulting. Yolanda is the founder of Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy and the founder of Allies in Action Membership Network. Yolanda is the first African-American president of Women in Development in New York. Welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. I am so excited about this conversation. I'm excited to talk about the impact of woke and allies in action and the changes that you've seen over the past year. And I'm excited to talk about inclusion, diversity, and equity. But before we get into the meat of our conversation, I always like to ask our guests to take us back to that moment that they discovered that development could be a career path. And I know that you, like many fundraisers, myself included, got your start in development as an undergrad. Take us back to University of Tulsa.
Oh gosh, it was a long time ago. A long, long time ago in a land far away in Oklahoma. I really did this. I got involved in philanthropy and fundraising because, from the artistic perspective, as an artist, I wanted to see the arts survive. And there had been what I called an epidemic of orchestra closings because you had, in that instance, a cellist who was moonlighting as an executive director had certainly had the artistic acumen, probably more of an artistic director, but not necessarily the business and financial and administrative acumen to keep things running smoothly and going strong. And so I noticed all these orchestras were closing. I had a professor who was getting a music performance degree who said, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, "I'm not going to have any companies to sing for. Nobody's going to be there to accompany for me. Dancers can dance to pre-recorded, but an opera singer cannot sing to pre-recorded music. We need an orchestra." So I said, "I'm going to make sure that we, get this in order." And arts administration was very new at that time. But even while I was in undergrad, I threw the first School of Music fundraising gala as a senior in college. It was so fun. Got everybody together. We needed to raise some funds for some things there. And that's where it really bit me. I said, "Oh, I love this." I always loved doing events and convening people and bringing them together. But then I said, there's something to this. And so I went on from there to pursue a graduate degree in arts administration with a development focus. And so that's really where it started, was a passion of mine to keep things, survival of the arts, really.
Right. I love that story and how you brought together your passion and your performing and your, desire to do good and to make things happen and made a career of it. So you did something similar, 18 months ago. You saw a need, you saw a community that, was coming together and wanted to come together in dialogue and conversation and action. Bring us back 18 months ago when you launched Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy and Allies in Action.
Well, I was sitting right here. Actually,
we haven't really moved much in 18 months.
No, but I was sitting here, and you mentioned that I am the first African-American president of Women in Development New York, and that was a huge diversity milestone for that organization. So I co-launched a diversity and inclusion task force when I was president-elect, and that was a 2-year endeavor that culminated last year right around the time of George Floyd. And so a final report and article that I wrote in the Chronicle of Philanthropy was launched, and I learned a lot from that process. And what I really learned was that change takes time. You stay the course, you continue the work. Change takes time because when it comes to inclusion, equity, and diversity, which is what I call it, because you can have all the diversity in the world, and if you're not inclusive and welcoming, it's all for naught. I realized that we needed a space for the unique experience of being women of color in the sector. It had reached fever pitch. I was doing some career roundtables, and that's what people were telling me. And I said, now's the time to do this, because all of that work is individual work that then informs the whole. And so I said, let's do it. I've always been about championing women, about equity and being more inclusive that way. And so it was a very natural thing for me. I felt really called to do it. I'm a person of faith. I felt truly like this was what I was supposed to be doing, and created something that's been really beautiful and that grew to more than 1,000 members, in about a year across the United States and in other countries. We're in 4 countries total, and it just couldn't be more rewarding. We have a leadership institute that launched that was successful. We have so many different programs and initiatives and things that we do to try to bring the community together. But around that same time, I was getting outreach from white allies who were literally saying, Yolanda, what do I do? Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't really feasible or sustainable to create individual allyship plans for everybody who was getting in touch. So I said, okay, Allies in Action opens with, it is not a Black person's responsibility to teach white people about racism. You have to educate yourself. But I do believe in solidarity, and November was coming at that point, and there was so much at stake in our country and in our society. So I just said, if you're ready to do the work and not just check a box, then I'm here for that, and let's do it. I have a friend who happened to have been a member of the Obama administration, who's now a racial sensitivity expert. I did some brainstorming with her, and we came up with 4 pillars of education, legislation, inclusion, and action. And philanthropy is part of the action. We do a lot of work with the allies to help women and girls of color. And so it was that's another beautiful thing, to have both sides sort of the coin, to be able to help people. I just wanted to help, right, and move this forward.
Right, right. And, I think, certainly for myself as a white woman of privilege who in my lifetime and my family's lifetime, we have dealt with anti-Semitism, had to overcome it. My father and my grandfather had things that they were not able to accomplish because of their faith at the time. But, I still feel like, what can I do, right? How can I do more than talk, do more than, say that I'm an ally? What are these actions that I can take to be part of making a difference? And that's what I love that you've created in Allies in Action, are some very specific ways in which someone like me who's so devoted to social justice, who believes that I sit in this place where I can help to increase diversity in the workplace. So I love that you have launched that as well. Tell me a little bit, you said before, change takes time. What are some of the changes that you've seen over the past year?
Well, it's been it's been quite a year or so. There've been a lot of changes. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing the result of right now is what people are calling the Great Resignation. So I call it the Great Distraction that happened earlier this year into the Great Resignation. And that is because our humanity has really come to the fore. We are more aware from a donor perspective also. It's why this is a golden era for planned giving, because we are very much aware of our mortality right now. And it really made people take a step back from the fundraising sector, from the good work, from philanthropy, everywhere, every sector. Take a step back. Who am I? What are my priorities as an individual? And how does that inform the work that I do? So that's been really prevalent in the fundraising and philanthropy sectors. So I've seen that big change. I've seen clearly a shift, toward racial and gender justice. But now what we have to make sure we do, because everybody was stuck at home and in front of their computers and focused in a different kind of way, now we have to make sure that the work continues, that it wasn't fleeting, that it wasn't a box that was being checked, that it wasn't an event that I have a friend on the Woke Advisory Committee. It's not an event, it's a lifestyle.
Right.
And so that's the work that we're doing, that we're really focused upon now, coming out of that first year into the second year of things. So I think those are some of the big changes that I've seen because it's impacted everyone in every way, their philanthropy, the way that they live their lives, the jobs that they choose to do, the work that they want to undertake, the money that they want to give,
Mm-hmm.
the way that people raise money as well. So I think those have been two really pivotal things. And so we
Right.
have to continue moving forward.
Right. And I think that when, and I've heard the phrase, this is a movement, not a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And as you had said before, it really does begin with creating inclusive communities so that there are cultural changes and new cultural norms. But it's interesting because I've heard you say this, you've written about this, and yet I still see DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And so share with me a little bit about, what do organizations need to do differently or think differently when they are launching these DEI initiatives and DEI task forces? How do you kind of turn that, put the I first?
Well, you have to make sure that you're not just looking at the numbers, but you're looking at the environment and you're looking at the reality. You really have to do an assessment first. You have to be really honest with yourself, and that can be difficult to do. Many people find things that they may not want to find or, things that they have to admit. That's okay because you have to meet yourself. You have to meet other people where they are in this work in order for it to be authentic and in order to have really lasting change. I say people change systems. And
Mm-hmm.
it takes time for that to happen. So I think that you have to ensure fairness and equity in order to have the I, right? And there's so many acronyms for it. There's EDIB. I love Jedi right now, probably because of the Star Wars subconscious there. But you have to have justice there too. It's very important.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so, idea, and so adding and then other people, belonging and access.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to create an environment, know who you are, know where you are, create an environment where you can make actionable change and take real steps toward that change. Setting a goal, I recommend to people to reassess right now with the return to work. Many people had committees. They didn't really have a game plan. Everybody had a statement, right? And so now it's just, and I don't say that to trivialize those statements, but I struggled at a certain point over the past year, especially when we went into working with some of our partners on the anti-Asian racism that was happening, women within our community, and some cultural partners to support them. And I just said, that's when it hit me, the performative nature of some things. And I was like, we need to go back all the way back to last summer and think of who said what and did you mean it? And
Mm-hmm.
even if it came from an authentic place in your heart, what actionable, realistic steps were related to that in order to see real change take place?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really, really, really important.
And I think it's interesting. We talk that the great resignation is all about, for some reason, people leaving organizations. And I have had conversations with women of color who have said the actions were not aligned with the statements that my organization was making. And so that's a real shame in this particular instance of a phenomenal organization with a wonderful mission and doing good work wasn't doing those actions that I think were really needed, nor listening to their employees, and, lost a phenomenal employee. And, it was really important for me to hear her story and to
Mm-hmm.
understand the emotional challenge and the emotional toll that it took going to work every day and not feeling an alignment between statements and actions. And I think that is some of looking in the mirror for organizations, as you were saying, to ask the really difficult questions. How are our actions, our strategic plans, our operations, recognition of different holidays, for example, in creating inclusive communities? I heard a woman talking on a panel, a Muslim woman, who said that she was invited to a meeting at 4 o'clock during Ramadan, and no one asked her if that was okay. And so, good intentions, but that's not an inclusive culture, right? And so how are we increasing our awareness and being really, really intentional?
Right.
Which I think is, just so important. What has surprised you over the last year as I think so many organizations are in this work, so many individuals are in a journey. And I think that we have begun to see, I think, some much more higher level placements in nonprofits in very high leadership roles of men and women in color. What changes have you seen that you feel positive about, and what worries you?
I think that some of the changes that I've seen that are positive, I can think of two in particular, and one is donor loyalty in the philanthropic sector. That was a lovely thing to see happen, even when lives were at stake and changing, networks were changing. Everyone working in the fundraising and philanthropic sectors had to go back again to that humanity and say, this is not just a transactional sort of situation where they're a donor on paper, it's a person, and they have maybe gone through some things as well. So we need to have those real conversations, and donors really stuck with their organizations. They may or may not have been able to do what they usually do, but they did something, whatever they could. And they were really flexible around methods of giving, unrestricting funds that have been previously restricted in endowments in different areas, and allowing people just, you know what, I know that I gave you this grant for children's, early years work. Keep the lights on, just use it for whatever you need to do. And that was a really, really lovely, lovely thing. And that's really, charity versus philanthropy. And that's what we're trying to get to do now, is take those seeds that were planted and say, okay, don't just check the box, see it all the way through, make it a lifestyle. I have this whole thing, the philanthropic lifestyle, that tries to think that way. And then the other thing, to your point, that I've seen is progress. Certainly there's progress because everyone, wants to be on that DEI sort of bandwagon, but we don't want it to be a bandwagon. We want it to be a more just and equitable society through these types of initiatives. So what we want, again, is not checking a box, but changing the very fabric of the sector and making sure that when you do have these people of color who are able to go into these leadership positions because they're well qualified for it, that you create an environment around them that continues to support them. That you're not just like, I did it, I'm done. Great. You've got, that person in place, they're placed, great. That where's the next one? And, it makes me go back to RBG when they were 9. So how does your board look? Are you willing to have 50%, 60%? Are you really ready to see the change? Are people ready to give up privilege in order for this to be lasting change? So I'm optimistic. I call myself a pragmatic optimist. It's my Midwestern pragmatism. But I am optimistic about it all, but we have to stay the course, and we can't get tired, and we can't get distracted, and we have to be really intentional about it all.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'm so excited just to, have the opportunity to hear your thoughts, and, this conversation should be continued, every 6 months or so, right? Because I do think we all have to be holding each other accountable and learning from each other. So we promise our guests that we will stick to about a 20-minute conversation. We always like to end our conversations by having a tradition and keeping with our theme of Breakfast with Boyden, asking our guests to share a memorable cup of coffee and who you shared that cup of coffee with.
Should I, while I'm thinking about it, shall I show my Boyden cup?
Absolutely. Every guest on our show gets a Boyden mug.
I don't drink coffee. There's an herbal infusion in here, but I will say, because I love to bring people together over tea. So the question is, whom have I had a meaningful conversation with over tea?
Mm-hmm. Over tea. Whatever you want to put in the mug.
Whatever's in the mug, yes. That's so funny. I would say that I have a Christmas tea party every year. And I bring people from, I celebrate Christmas, but I have my Jewish friends, everybody's there. And we celebrate the year together, and we go around and we talk about how we know each other and how they know me. And I love to just stand back and watch everyone come together. They're from different backgrounds. I've seen business deals and connections made at my tea party. It's amazing. And I just love to give people delicious food and beverage and let it just go. And so I think that I enjoy that so much because I learn so much and because we take so much from that sense of community, of coming together and being able to talk and just relax and sit back and have that mug and have that delicious, that sensory experience, and also be able to have honest conversations about what we've gone through. I did it virtually this past year. I sent everybody a pretty little box full of all of their tea accoutrement, and we got on Zoom and we still talked about it. And I wanted to talk to everybody. And we had people who were in tears at some point because it was a tough year.
Wow.
But I love to bring people together that way. So I would say my nearest and dearest and those in my life and my colleagues that I bring together for that cup of tea at least
That's
once a year.
amazing. So if I bring my mug, I have to get it in here. If I bring my mug, can I crash your tea party this year?
Yes, 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 you can. You are welcome. Because I really love to do it. I even just found these little teapots that are like they're sugar cubes shaped like teapots. I'm so ready for this. So I would love to have you. I enjoy the work that Boyden does, and I appreciate your commitment to equity. And so you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Yolanda, thank you so much for being our guest on Breakfast with Boyden today.
Thank you for having me.